Hi everyone, my name is Marc. I'm one of the co-founders of Mod. Maybe you heard of us. We were also involved in the open source construction scenery here, also in Munich and also last year. And what the company does is basically we are trying to create better, more efficient supply chains for the prefab world, which we're kind of moving into. And I want to make a case today for a better supply chain and also for open source technology. Maybe just on my background, so I don't have any background in construction architecture. I also don't have a background in IT or computer or whatever, right? So has a big disadvantage. I'm always the one who's asking the dumb questions, obviously, right? But it also has an advantage because it also allows me to ask the dumb questions and basically taking maybe learnings from other industries. And this is kind of what we did here. So I think the best shot we have to actually solve the biggest problems we have in construction is industrializing our industry, right? I mean, the productivity issue that we always hear about, read about, and so on is one part. The other part is becoming more sustainable, you know, considering the significant CO2 footprint that our industry is actually contributing to the overall. So there's, I think, really only one way to do this, and this is by industrializing our industry. Now, the path to completely being like completely industrialized, just like other industries, is the long one, obviously, right? Because we're starting at the very low end, on the very left, you know, and this is basically an analysis from, I think, 2015 or something. And you can see if we really want to be kind of at the stage like, let's say, advanced manufacturing or utilities or like somewhere up here in the middle, not even up there, it's a long way. And we're basically where this little arrow is. So we really still have a long way to go. And this road apparently is paved with broken dreams and shattered hubris, right? I mean, on this little way we already have a lot of companies who kind of didn't make it, you know, who lost a lot of money or who basically, you know, sunk a lot of investments. And I mean, some of them, you know, I mean, Katerra is one of the biggest blow-ups, you know, but also Schindler. I mean, of course, it's a Swiss company, it still exists, but they also had like a huge project which was like 300 million to kind of, you know, make their elevator systems more, let's say, more, you know, more prefabricated and more modular and so on. And it really didn't work that well. Xela, they had like 5 factories. They had to close down 2 last year, which was basically instead of producing just bricks, it would produce walls. I mean, there are a lot more of these examples, right? And this is basically what we're facing, you know? I mean, a lot of the investments we do in that industry really don't play out. It's very simple, right? It just doesn't work. And the question is, why? Why is that? You know, what can we do to kind of, you know, maybe don't have that many failures on that road to, let's say, an industrialized construction industry? So what went wrong and what did we learn from it, you know? And so, I mean, of course, there's a lot of analysis around what Katerra did wrong. There's a lot of analysis what the other companies did wrong. One part, which I thought was very precise, is that Katerra obviously tried to solve a lot of productivity problems at the same time. Same with Vive, as some of the other companies as well. So you would think, okay, obviously the learning is, you know, if you're kind of fully integrated and if you're trying to do too many things at the same time within this industry, it's very, very hard to actually make it work, right, in this particular industry. And then you look at kind of the new examples we have in the market right now, you know, like the ones where we read about all the time in all these, you know, fancy magazines or where we hear about like tech conferences and so on. And some of them, you know, I mean, Gropius obviously, and they're doing everything, right? And it's a fantastic idea. It's a fantastic concept. Same with Nokera. I mean, they're basically fully integrated from development all the way to the manufacturing part, and they're doing 80% of everything themselves, right? There are also examples from the US. Greystar, obviously, coming from the developer side, it's a lot easier, but they're also doing everything themselves, completely integrated. And then there are like 2 examples I just heard last week in San Francisco at the Industrialized Construction Forum at Stanford. So Sustainable Living Innovations, yeah, great company. They started in 2008. It was really, really long way to actually get where they went. They're really proud. They have like 20 patents on certain building, like the way how they produce stuff, how they manufacture their module system and so on. And they still have only, within the last, I think, almost 20 years, only built 10 projects, right? I mean, how would we ever end up in this up corner if like a company like this, is focusing on actually doing patents, but only building 10 buildings, over 20 years, I mean, this is not gonna really work and scale as we would like to see. The same with Intelligent City, it's a fantastic system, it's really amazing when you look at it and kind of, they have one project now and they have the whole chain kind of completely covered, super sophisticated technology. Of course, it's only their IP, so they don't share anything, right? And they have one project, right? And they started like 2 or 3 years ago. So, it's amazing, but I don't think this will work. And that's also the reason why we started Mod. And don't get me wrong, I totally hope that these companies will be successful, right? Because what we also learned is whenever you have these major blow-ups in an industry like Katerra, we all suffer, right? Because we will always have to argue against Katerra, kind of as a straw man, because they will always ask, okay, if you're doing this new solution now, so what about Katerra? What did they do wrong? Like, why does it work? Why does your system work? So I really hope that all these guys are successful. But on the other hand, I also believe that there may be things we can change as an industry. So what happens with industries, and this is really kind of where my experience comes from other industries, energy and renewable energy and so on, is to kind of see when industries integrate vertically, right? I mean, they do it there are basically 4 reasons why they do it. Market is too risky and unreliable. There's like this power imbalance, so they kind of want to, integrate backward or forward to kind of make sure that they're not dependent on one of the other people in the value chain, or they want to create market power, and basically control a market, or a market is young, right? And we've seen this in other industries all the time. It's the same thing when you kind of look at Vestas, for the wind energy, for the wind turbines, same thing, right? In the beginning, they didn't have a supply chain, so they created everything themselves to control the whole value chain from building the blades, even the machines that build the blades, all the way to kind of developing and constructing and assembling the wind turbines. Same with SpaceX. Originally, Musk tried to kind of buy the rocket system from the Russians. It was absolutely not reliable. They were basically ripping them off. So he said, you know what, instead of kind of trying to buy it somewhere in the market, we'll just create our own rocket system. That was kind of the origin of SpaceX. Solar Millennium, for concentrated solar power plants, they did everything. The mirrors, the receiver tubes, the development, buying the land, doing it, kind of doing the systems and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the natural reaction when you have a new market to kind of integrate everything. But this will not be the future for this one here, because if we continue like this, we'll never get anywhere. So what you see here, asset specificity, so that's basically how do you produce, right? And frequency, how often do you need this, right? And we're kind of in the construction industry, we're here. And now kind of what you see is we're integrating vertically for the reasons I said before. But this is only a very small part of the market, right? And the question is really, how do we get to the 95% of the market, of the small mid-cap developers who's just doing 1, 2, 3, 4 projects per year? How do we actually get those guys to become more industrialized, to use more prefabricated elements or use more modules or whatever? And this is kind of the big question, right? So from our point of view, and this is also why we started this company, is really what's the next step, right? What do we have to change in order to make it work and to really scale it to the 95% of the market? So one thing is from rigid chains to kind of more flexible supply networks. The other thing is from IP silos to open source, and that's also why we're here. And also from big bets to small bets, make it easier to become industrialized and don't force developers and architects to kind of choose between a complete system or kind of do it the traditional way, right? So what we do is just kind of as a reminder, we basically have a software system that we're currently developing. It's not, fully available yet. We basically take a 3D model, we kind of algorithmically check for the prefab potential so we can understand kind of if certain parts of it are, can be prefabricated. From a supplier base, right now we have 4,500 suppliers in the database, which we basically can access. And we help the architect and developer very early in the process to kind of check what parts of the building could be prefabricated. and then basically integrate it into its process. So it's very easy, it's very simple, it's free initially, so that anybody can basically do this. So that's what we do. Now, what we basically, back to the first point, instead of kind of rigid chains, we believe that it makes much more sense to have something like a market logic, where you basically have access to capacity on this side, where you have access to capacity even of the integrated players, and that these guys, if they're kind of looking for manufacturers, that they can also access this thing. And right now it's a very, very difficult process. It's a lot of work to actually find these suppliers, right? Also the configurators, the companies who basically don't have their own manufacturing, but they basically created this kit of parts system, they can actually access manufacturing. So we believe, a lot, like a system like this, that we've also seen in other industries, works much better, right? Second part with regards to open source, we also understood that, you have a lot of silos. You have a lot of companies who basically protect their IP and they're very proud of it. But it doesn't really help, right? I mean, the company examples I showed you before, they have these patents and all these things, but it doesn't really matter, for the developer. I don't care how you produce the wall, right? I don't care if it's like this super new system, because it doesn't matter for the product that I'm selling, because with the product at the end maybe is an apartment, right? And if the wall is done like this or like this, I don't really care, right? So I think it's a completely wrong way to kind of protect IP with regards to production, manufacturing technologies, and things like this, because it doesn't really make a difference on the product, right? At least not as much as these companies typically think. So we believe it's much better to kind of, make it more open source. So what we started with is kind of this domain language model, which allows you to basically compare different systems, right? To compare different elements. So it's a unified language, which allows you to basically translate a building part and make it comparable to all the other people who are out there in the market, between China and Brazil, who maybe produce something like it, to compare it, right? And the next part is validation engine, the recommendation engine, and our IP is only on top of that, right? But we share all the other stuff that we do, like really the hardcore tech at the very core, because we believe that the more people use something like this, the more powerful the whole movement will be, of industrializing our industry, instead of kind of just creating another silo. And the last part, big projects and small bets, right? And these are actually examples of customers. Okay, so very, very diverse. I just give you an example. Like on the top left, it's a super high-end developer for like millionaires resorts in like really random remote locations, like Bahamas, like Dubai, like where else do they have stuff? Like some locations, South America. So very hard to get actually people there, so there's not a big network of contractors that you can just get. So they were now looking for ways to prefabricate certain parts of these big resorts. Let's say the housing for the people who work there, or let's say certain little huts which are sitting on the golf course and so on. So they don't want to work with somebody who's doing the whole thing. They just want to have certain elements which allows them to actually make it a lot easier to get the stuff there. On the top right, very small, like a medium-sized developer from the southern, like very close to here, on the border, who's doing elderly housing, elderly homes, right? It's a very small developer who's working with his local supply chain, and he doesn't have kind of the experience with kind of really going to one of the big integrated players, but he wants to maybe think, he's now thinking, for example, getting bathroom pots from Norway, or getting balconies prefabricated, and so on and so forth. Here, this one is a Canadian affordable housing company in the north of Quebec. No one can actually build a house there, so they need to get them all from the south, travel there for 3 months and build this house. So he's now considering, doing certain parts of this building in prefabrication, and then deliver it up there. Right? So these are actually real customer examples that we have. And where you can see that they're not interested in kind of getting the whole system from one source, but they are interested in maybe, increasing the prefabrication share of their projects without kind of just throwing everything out of the window that they have designed and thought about and so on. So our vision, and that's also my last slide here, is really to make it so scalable and so easy that every construction project on the world will be checked for its prefab potential in the future, right? So that we basically create technology and a platform which allows you to really just with a click of a button within your design system, be it Revit or whatever you use, yeah, and basically just check what parts of the building could you get prefabricated from a real library, up-to-date library of suppliers. And right now we have like 4,500, so we're going to build this to 15,000 in the next year, and basically really see who could actually deliver a certain part of it. And that's our long-term vision. And we hope you can help us here, with kind of being part of this open source community and so on. And also if you have ideas or concepts, or if you have suppliers, or if you have people who could be interested in this, let me know. Would love to discuss with you. Thank you.